Looking at the chart-to-chart comparison of Volodymyr Zelenskyy to Vladimir Putin, you can appreciate that these two men are definitely linked in some kind of fated karmic way, insofar as the language of astrology points to such patterns, and I can certainly attest to the fact that it does. Indeed, the tragic and potentially deadly way which now links them also leads me to believe that their respective charts as cast, with what I think is the best information available, are quite correct by date and by time, because there are so many chart-to-chart connection coincidences, which is exactly what you would expect in extreme situations of this nature, where life and death hang in the balance. Between any two individuals, nodal connections and exchanges tend to be a telltale signal that they are inextricably linked. The person with the node is fascinated, obsessed, literally seized, and in a sense taken hostage by the other. And here you see Zelenskyy's nodal axis across 9 and a bit Libra conjoining Putin's sun, which is always the biggest dog in the lot. And when you see that the Eris in Putin's sun-Eris opposition is quite tightly in there, you realize this is big, and you know that Zelenskyy brings out Putin's cutthroat instincts, which might be sort of okay in a competitive situation, but in this case, obviously transmits something a lot darker. And if you flip the script and look at Putin's nodal axis across 18.5 degrees of Leo Aquarius, you see that it catches Zelenskyy's midheaven axis, also quite tightly, as well as his moon, because in his own chart, it's right there next to the IC. So now you know that if Zelenskyy is going to get obsessed and seized by Putin, it's equally true that Putin is likewise magnetized and seized by Zelenskyy. Now, Zelenskyy's rising Jupiter is opposed by Putin's Mars and Sagittarius in the 7th house of open enemies, which makes perfect sense. But I would deem this more dangerous for Zelenskyy because Mars is stronger and more comfortable in Sagittarius than Jupiter is in Gemini, a sign which is opposite to the sign it naturally rules. Meanwhile, Putin's Jupiter, his expansionary archetype, is in a tight square to Zelenskyy's midheaven axis, strongly suggesting they are at odds with each other, with Putin's sense of what is desirable, permissible, good to expand into, crashing into Zelenskyy's place in the world via that midheaven, since he obviously rejects it. Although we could add that since Putin has this very same aspect in his own chart, he would be slated to sooner or later expand into territory against his own best interests. Meanwhile, the 2022 continuing Saturn-Uranus square in the sky is bringing these two characters into uncompromising conflict because the two planets at odds in the sky line up in square to both Putin's MC axis as well as Zelenskyy's, which means they will both be determined to express their most self-willed energy, literally two wills crashing into one another, and worse still, since it is Uranus, inclining both men to take risks, and all of this in fixed signs, which is very stubborn and determined. And though this conflict does incline Putin into acting out through his most dynamic self, he does risk failure because his birth Uranus squares the entire Libra stellium, which means crashing and burning is always a distinct possibility. Zelenskyy is also on his Uranus half cycle of 84 years because 2022 is the year it opposes itself, a year which is well known by astrologers to almost always signify big changes in a person's life. In short, on account of the Uranus action, together with its current transiting connection to Saturn, we have ourselves here a very entrenched but also very volatile situation, and as I said, with the emphasis on fixed signs, two parties that are unlikely to give an inch. Then the astro situation gets really interesting and dicey because next you can identify why these two ultimately hate each other and would likely be happy to see the other dead and gone. Notice that Z's Pluto is next to V's Libra stellium, but especially the Sun-Saturn conjunction. And V returns to this favor with his own Pluto right next to Z's midheaven axis, but also in the vicinity of Z's Saturn. These Pluto to the angles and to Saturn can be among the most difficult connections between two people, generating fear, suspicion, and the urge to reject and destroy. Bottom line, as if we didn't already know, these two do not like each other and are clearly representing diametrically different positions that seem unlikely to ever be compromised, or at least not without a heck of a lot of work and or probably plenty of time.